Well, hi, everyone. My name is John Hill. I'm CEO for TechSage Solutions. We're a San Antonio-based managed IT and cybersecurity service provider. And today I'll be your host for our webinar titled, What Business Owners Should Know About Cyber Insurance and Protecting Their Business Assets. I'm excited to welcome my friend Justin Reinmuth, CEO for Techrug, the Technology Risk and Underwriting Group, to the webinar. Justin is an expert in the cyber insurance industry and will share a lot of critical information with us that all of us should know. Welcome, Justin. Thanks for joining us today.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks, John, for having me.
Now, over the last year or so, many of our clients have asked a lot of questions about cyber insurance, and we're going to try to address some of those questions today. And anyone that's on the webinar that's not one of our clients, we're happy to answer any of those questions. You'll find that Justin's got a wealth of information, and we'd love to address that. And my colleague Warren is going to be watching the chat, so please post your questions there, and he'll bring them up to Justin. So let's get started. Justin, one of the biggest questions we've had is, why does my business really need cyber insurance?
Yeah, the short answer to that is, tomorrow morning, unplug your network at 8 o'clock in the morning, turn it back on at 5 and tell me how your day goes. I don't think people, John, they understand that, how reliant we are with everything in the cloud, whether it's email, whether it's, the production environment of a company. But if God forbid there's a ransomware attack against an organization, first of all, the typical payment method is going to be digital currency, i.e. things like Bitcoin. Go and try, if you're not already set up, doing, having Bitcoin and that digital currency, go and try to do it. I mean, it takes a while to set it up. It's not like you can go out and, just, go to the bank and take out, a loan or, get something like that. So I think, people don't understand that, there's, with all this, ransomware attacks, we see one about every, 14 seconds now it's up to globally. So I don't know how many of those are in the US, but that's globally. I would tell you that most people, if, their neighbors said to you, hey, someone's trying to break into your house every 14 seconds, you're going to make sure that you buy a ton of security, whether it's cameras, dogs, building a moat around your house, potentially a gun, whatever it may be. But the other thing you're going to do is probably call, your personal insurance agent and say, hey, do I have, personal home insurance for if somebody steals my jewelry or my big screen TV or my furs or whatever it may be. So, that's the importance of cyber liability or cyber insurance, is that, we're so reliant on now the convenience of having everything in the cloud, but it's also, there's a lot of exposure when, if patches aren't done or certain things go wrong or an employee clicks on a link they shouldn't have, it can also take down the business for quite a long time and in just a matter of seconds.
Well, I guess it kind of behooves us all to really look strongly at that. Now, then a second thing would be, what's the correct limit that my business should have? What are some of those parameters that we need to look at to even determine that?
Yeah, so most people on this call, this is going to be a coverage and a limit question, but most people on the call, when they'll typically ask, why do I need cyber insurance? In terms of why an organization, when we ask them, why are you coming and getting the cyber policy? They usually will, kind of give us one of three examples. The first example, they'll explain that, hey, we've got a bunch of PHI or PII. So PHI is protected health information, and PII is personally identifiable information. So like social security number, dates of birth. If that information is exposed, and it could be a healthcare organization, it could be a law firm, it could be an accounting firm. I mean, we all have, PHI or PII that lives in our environment. Texas in this case has privacy laws on the books, and it says that you have to do A, B, and C, and D if this information is potentially exposed. So if somebody gets into your network, even if you don't know it was exposed, you've got to make sure that you hire forensics to come in. And if that information was compromised, then you have to, provide credit monitoring. You have to send out, certified letters. You may, if you don't, do it quick enough, you may, potentially violate some sort of regulatory obligation, right? So then there comes in regulatory fines and penalties that could. So the first group, John, is going to kind of be, we'll call it the sensitive information group, right? That's why they're coming to take out a cyber policy. The second group will usually give us some sort of example centered around, their IT systems. If this goes down and we have to pay ransom, I want to make sure that I've got money for cyber extortion. We could potentially lose business because of this. So I want to make sure that I've got business interruption. Maybe there's some cost to replace the data. There could be cost to replace the hardware, what we call bricking coverage. So the second group is really focused on the importance of their systems and keeping that up day to day in order to run their business and service their clients. And then the last group will give us some sort of, cyber crime or business email compromise. So it could be that, an organization got tricked into sending money to someone they shouldn't have. It could be, that MFA wasn't properly or even installed on email and remote access. And, somebody got tricked into sending money to someone they shouldn't have. Or sometimes we see, John, where, an organization, their email is compromised and the vendor actually pays them the money, but it was paid and the bad guys intercepted it and had them send it to a different banking routing and account, or gave them a different routing and account information. So, the business email compromise could be you get tricked in or a vendor pays you, but they were given the wrong instructions. And so those are usually the three components. Again, it could be all three. It could be two of the three, one of the three, but that's why somebody would, typically take out cyber. The other thing is in terms of limits, it's an impossible question to answer. A lot of people will say, well, gosh, we've got this many records. And so, if we potentially have 5,000 records and that information is compromised and we know that, it's, roughly $70 per record, then we can get a number. I guess that's one way of doing it. But usually what we see on our end is that, on these ransomware attacks, it's kidnap and ransom insurance. So are the bad actors going to want $200,000 or $2 million? I've seen it both. If we do, start communicating, we always ask for a decryption key. So we don't pay the ransom until we know that the keys work. So is the decryption key going to work the first time or is it not going to work the first time? I've seen it both. If when we do pay for the decryption keys, John, how much or how many of those keys are actually going to work? Is it going to be 30%? Is it going to unlock 80% of the data? Again, we've seen it both. Is it going to be 1 terabyte of data that gets locked up or is it going to be 2 terabytes? You know what I mean? Like there's so many moving parts. It's not like your auto insurance where, if you got a 3-year-old Honda, you can go on kbb.com and find the value of that 3-year-old Honda if something goes wrong. So, the cyber insurance doesn't work that way.
Now, have you seen over the last couple of years the actual amounts of ransom, for instance, that are being asked? Have those gone up dramatically?
That's increased, and the downtime and the claims that have increased. So they're getting the frequency of this is picking up, and the downtime is getting worse because the encryption is so bad, right? In other words, it takes a long time for us to decrypt that data. So I guess my answer to that would be err on the side of caution. If you think you only need 1 million, go for 2. If you think you need 2, go for 3. But, again, anyone, there was a large, provider to IT service, folks such as yourself. And, they were hit and, there was rumors that, that the ransom started out at $75 million and they ended up getting it for somewhere in like the mid 30s. Well, that's a $40 million variance. You know what I mean? That's a huge number. So had their agent told them, well, you only need 30 million and they kept it at 75 million, you'd be $45 million short. So, on these things, it's impossible to determine a limit.
Well, in any way you look at it, it's a bad scene that you're going to run into with something like that. So now, why shouldn't I just be able to add cyber to my regular business or professional liability insurance?
Yeah, it's not comprehensive enough. Usually, kind of a rule of thumb is, the more stringent the underwriting process is, the better the policy usually is, right? So, on these, forever these carriers, whether it was your business insurance or, folks on here that might have some sort of professional liability or malpractice insurance, they would add endorsements, John, where they would give you, and a lot of them would cover early on kind of the PHI, PII example where, to notify people and provide credit monitoring and potentially regulatory fines and penalties, and they might throw on $50,000 of that, and they would never address, the cyber extortion component, i.e. ransomware. They would never address the cyber crime. Some carriers now will give you a sublimit of $50,000, for ransomware. And they'll maybe include $10,000 of cyber crime, but I don't know what Bitcoin's trading at today, but I mean, it varies, right? It could be $10,000 and then it could be $60,000 6 months later, so you don't know what that number is, but usually, they'll want 1 or 2 Bitcoin per endpoint, so if they lock up 5 servers, for example, and it's 1 Bitcoin and it's trading at $50,000, you're at 250,000. That $50,000, I don't know how many people on this webinar could self-insure 200,000, but I don't think a lot of people would want to. The other thing too, John, is that those add-ons, they aren't comprehensive. They're not going to cover usually bricking coverage, which is computer hardware replacement. They're not going to cover invoice manipulation. They're not going to cover maybe contingent bodily injury and property damage. So a comprehensive policy is going to be a lot broader. Plus, I think the benefit of the comprehensive policy, a standalone policy, what we call it, is that, they're doing external surface scans and watching, again, it's not the production environment, but where the attackers are looking for vulnerabilities on the outside. So you almost get another set of eyes, John, for these people that are your clients that are looking, that are running these, AI scans and looking for where attackers for vulnerabilities that they would. Plus you get, access to, maybe, disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans. I mean, there's a whole host of information that the carriers are making available to policyholders that, a lot of our clients say, these are great resources and this is stuff our organization needs. So hopefully that answers that question.
I guess a thing that has really concerned us recently over probably the last 12 months, the questionnaires that a company has to fill out when they're either renewing their current cyber policy or getting a brand new one. It's gone from like a 5 questions, 1 pager to dozens of questions and 3 and 4 pages. Why have they gone to all that? Why have they added so much to those questionnaires? And how does that kind of relate to the fact that the rates are going up dramatically?
Yeah. So the first part of that, I mean, a lot of businesses, what they did, they said, and my IT service provider wants me to do A, B, and C. The insurance company isn't making me. Therefore, insurance will be the first line of defense. So I'm not going to do multi-factor. I'm not going to do EDR. I'm not going to do security awareness training. Then the carrier said, hey, for every dollar we collected, we're paying out $3.50. You want the insurance policy to also be your IT security policy. We're not going to get punched in the face anymore. So guess what? We're going to raise your rate to catch up and make up for all these losses that we've had. And we're going to also create our own set of minimum security standards and requirements that we're going to ask you to meet. So, and I don't know, John, people on this call, but if you don't have multi-factor everywhere, when I say everywhere, like email and remote access, if you aren't doing endpoint detection response, EDR, again, I'm going to leave John up to explain what some of these are for you. I don't want to tie up this webinar and make it into a security webinar, but if you're not going to do the 3-2-1 kind of old backup rule, segregated backups, right, where we can pull backups, if we need to, from multiple, locations, the cloud being one. If you're not going to do security awareness training, if you're not going to do privileged access and stuff, you're not going to get a comprehensive policy. The carriers maybe a year ago would say, hey, if you do it, the premium will be $3,000 instead of $7,000, but they still couldn't collect enough $7,000 when people didn't have the right security. So they just put a line in the sand and said, you're going to do it and your premiums are going to go up. So, this is just the new normal, because, the folks on the other end that are, causing these claims, they're investing more financial resources and more, human capital, right? Employees and stuff like that, because it is a business, to make sure that they're going after organizations and taking advantage of these vulnerabilities and weaknesses within these organizations. So to answer your question, I mean, if you were to look at a risk management pie chart on this conversation today, you have to have the right security and you have to have cyber insurance. If you're going to rely on one or the other, it's not going to work.
Well, and that's really where, where we've seen a lot of companies that have contacted us, they've gotten their renewal forms, and this is not necessarily even clients, but other companies contacting us say, okay, we don't understand how to fill this out. What am I going to do? And whenever we advise them with some of that, a large number of companies, aren't doing the things that you listed off is even a minimum.
And you know what, John, I think the other thing too is like, the reason we even preach for our clients, I mean, you got to invest in security is, people don't understand, insurance policies, have limitations, so, the business interruption might not go as far as you think it should go, certain carriers now are starting to put in there what we call co-insurance clauses. So they're taking a little lead from the healthcare carrier, or I'm sorry, the health insurance carriers. And that when I say co-insurance, I'm just going to say, let's say your cyber extortion limit is $2 million and you get hit and the ransom is $2 million. If the carrier puts a 20% co-insurance clause in there, that means that particular organization has to come up with $400,000 because the carrier is only going to pay 1.6. So, you don't want to get in these situations because sometimes the limitations are what the carriers are doing in terms of endorsements or sublimiting certain coverages. The other thing, and people don't talk about this enough, is kind of the emotional and mental toll that it takes on, a business owner. Again, imagine that you're shut down for 2 or 3 weeks and clients are hounding you. Why can't I get this patient record? Why can't I get this tax return? Why can't I get this order processed? It's very stressful. I mean, we've had clients, and I wouldn't tell you anything, John, that's not true, but that have had to take, Xanax or Klonopin, or they've asked, does a carrier offer PTSD counseling? We had one where somebody went and got, through a therapist, like light therapy, knitting therapy. So I mean, these are just things that there's an emotional and kind of I guess physical toll because people don't sleep well either. So those are the things you just don't want to get in the situation. So as much as you can, upfront investing in security, it's only going to save you, because at the end, when you call me and you enact the insurance policy, it's like the fire department showing up at your house. Is it going to be a 1-bedroom or a whole house fire? I tend to like to see 1-bedroom fires. Those go a little bit better than whole house fires. So it's got to be security up front, and then take out a cyber insurance policy if you get in that, oh, what moment.
Well, and there's the kind of the, in a way, softer costs that come into some of this too, because if you were to have a breach, after you report that, then, what happens next, breach response and all that. I'm sure you've dealt with some of that, as you've gone through these last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, it's, when you get in there, I mean, it takes these claims, they take a lot of time away from your business, right? I mean, when you want to turn in, like you said, if it's forensics, you're going to have to, work with these forensic people, get reports, maybe provide them some additional information. In the business interruption, you might have to have your accounting firm, provide some stuff, that they'll want to see. There's just a lot of documentation and stuff. It's kind of like, in a way, anyone that's gone through a lawsuit, when, the opposing side wants you to produce all these documents, the insurance carrier is doing some of that stuff. So it just takes a lot of time away from the business. And I can't stress enough the importance. And listen, I'm a consumer of IT services just like everyone else is on this call, but I have to, because I'm probably more diligent, and, they tell I'm the best client because I see everything that goes wrong. So, I would tell the people on the call, if I'm spending a lot, a percentage of my, and John's probably got all these statistics, but a percentage of my revenue and is goes towards IT, there's certain things that, maybe sometimes I'm like, do I really need it? But then I think to myself, what's the cost? If it's an extra $1,000 a year and I know that I don't have to go through this exercise, then it's $1,000 well spent.
Well, something that I have talked to a number of folks about is that, let's say an incident happens, whether it's ransomware, whether it's, some other type of malware, some direct hacking, what the process is. Do they call, their IT guys? Do they call us first? Do they call the insurance companies first? In my opinion is they need to call us first, because we're going to help to at least isolate whatever it is that's going on in that network a little bit. But then, I would guess the insurance company's next. And then, some insurance companies have teams that handle different aspects of the remediation. Some work with the IT provider that's working with that client. What are you seeing along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably both. I mean, I think you need it's probably 1A and B, right? But I would go with the insurance carrier first, just because if you want to spend their money, you got to get their permission, and they're the ones that are backing you up. But I think 1B is, again, getting a hold of your MSP, because if there's any sort of damage control, right, that can be done, they're going to be the first one to do it, because the carriers will get on there, but it might take them a couple hours, right? So it's, and the reason why is that there's an abundance of ransomware attacks. So what you were saying, John, they call them, these vendors are on their what they call panel lists, where they've got a list of folks that they'll use that will provide forensics, that will provide counsel, that'll provide the remediation services. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to coordinate and get all those those parts moving and rowing at the same time. But yeah, I think that it's 1A and B. I would first start with the insurance carrier, and then the IT service provider. We oftentimes educate our MSPs that we're dealing with. Reach out to the clients, or have the client get a hold of their cyber carrier and make them aware that I work with TechSage, and if anything goes wrong, maybe it's a little bit proactive, but you can work on some communication of what authority the IT service provider has within the policy and what they don't have, because the carrier doesn't want to let a $5,000 or $10,000 problem become a $200,000 problem because John didn't work in the first couple hours, right? But again, John needs that permission from the carrier to do certain things and not do certain things, because it is a crime scene at that point, and until the detective shows up, you don't want to mess with any of the evidence.
Yeah, no kidding, because you certainly don't want to minimize your ability to collect and get some support there on the financial side. Warren, I was wondering, are there any questions from our attendees at this point?
Not at this point, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, one of the other things that I could probably address is that, oftentimes, these businesses, when they're going through and looking at cyber insurance, and believe me, we all pay attention to costs and premiums, but not all these cyber policies are created equal. It's still a little bit of an unregulated policy, and so pay attention to some things like the co-insurance. Ask your agent or your agency that writes your cyber policy, do we have co-insurance on the cyber extortion? The other thing is now, some of the carriers are defining, what's the definition of computer system. So, a lot of folks on these calls are going to use third parties, i.e. Microsoft for email, and then, different backup providers and stuff. Is if those providers, because we continue to see, these bad actors moving up the chain, and they're hitting these, what we call supply chain attacks, i.e. Microsoft. So if Microsoft gets hit and your data that's in their care, custody, and control, is that protected if there's some sort of business interruption, or to replace that data? So read the definition of computer system. So I just wanted to get that point across, because oftentimes people will buy cyber insurance based on who the lowest provider is. But lowest provider and broadest coverage doesn't, sometimes it'll link up. I'm not saying it doesn't, but a lot of times it doesn't link up, so I would just pay attention, because you might pay for a policy and go, wow, I saved $500, but one carrier didn't have co-insurance and the other one didn't. If you get hit, using my example earlier, you just made a $400,000 mistake to save $500.
Well, something that I've heard a few times too is that, a business owner or manager says, well, my business is small. I don't have anything that the hackers would want. I don't have anything that they'd be willing to spend effort breaking in and getting something from me. What would you tell these guys?
I've never been on a call where somebody said, I specifically targeted you because you're a 3-person accounting firm. They don't care. They look for vulnerability and exposures. In other words, they're looking, John, for people to stay asleep at the wheel, not implement certain technology, not pay attention to certain patches, right? Doing stuff like that, and paying attention, sorry, I should say updates. And then, they'll go out and they'll attack. And a lot of times, if you do have cyber insurance, they're in your email, they can see this. And sometimes it's kind of ironic how the ask is the same as the cyber extortion limit, So, the people that don't have cyber insurance often think, well, they'll just leave me alone. I don't have insurance. I can't pay the ransom. They don't, it's supply and demand right now. I mean, the supply or the supply of clients that they have asking, for, help because they're down. I mean, I've been on these calls. It's like a call center when you talk to these people. I mean, they've got calls coming in, think about it, with ransomware attacks every 14 seconds, they're not hurting for clients, So when they throw that, net into the ocean and they reel in a fish, you don't want to play with them. Fine. I mean, unfortunately, they don't have the same moral compass as, maybe you and I do, but they'll just sit around and wait and just let your business die on the vine, right? Because they're picking up another call, in the next couple of minutes that somebody that might want to pay. Now, again, might they back off of the, $2 million and settle for, 1.6 or 1 million? Yeah, but they're not going to do it for $5,000. They're just not going to, in my experience.
Well, yeah. And then the thing that most people don't realize either is that, especially in the case of ransomware attacks, it's not a hacker trying to put something on your system. It's, automated web bots that are just looking for a vulnerability to hit and looking for a way to get in or the email to come in and click on. So it doesn't really matter. You could be a one person size company and have the same likelihood of being hit. And quite often the attackers don't even really know what size company you are, and they don't care. But as has been evidenced by some of these guys, hitting a really large company and asking for $500 ransom and things like that, to where it's just, I guess, the more inexperienced hackers are leveraging that.
I mean, there's even things like, ransomware as a service. It sounds kind of crazy, but, for $150, $200, I mean, you can buy some of these codes, that will expose these vulnerabilities, and people do it, So, it's definitely out there. I think one other thing, John, to bring up is that, a lot of people will think, well, gosh, I use an IT service provider, so therefore if something goes wrong, their insurance will cover us. It just doesn't work that way. An IT service provider will carry a cyber E&O policy, much like a doctor will carry medical malpractice for their error, their omission, their mistake, their negligence. An accounting firm or a law firm or an insurance agency, whatever it may be, they've got their own set of exposures, right? Again, what happens if a vendor that I rely on, i.e. Microsoft, has a breach? That's not the IT services provider problem. That's a Microsoft problem. So now you've got to get in line to sue them. What happens again if you have an employee, an email comes through and it's just a good email address, right? But it's coming from a bad, person on the other side, and you click on it and you do something. That's a you problem. That's not an IT service provider problem. So, I think that's often a misconception on why people don't buy cyber insurance, because they think, well, I'm in the cloud, I use an IT service provider, they'll take care of it. They won't. Their policies are written for an error, omission, negligence, and providing a professional service. If that wasn't done, the policy's off the table.
Well, it's all a mess out there right now.
Well, it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, again, I would tell people, if you're thinking and going, gosh, should I shut down my business? With the right security, the chances of this happening is extremely small. I mean, it's there. Don't get me wrong. It is. I mean, we all live with it, and even again, with the right security, if it does happen, things going sideways, it diminishes a ton, but if you're not going to implement the right security, and then you're not going to take out a cyber insurance policy, it just, when the tornado comes through town, it probably will be a Cat 5. It's not going to be a tropical storm or a Cat 1. So, I can't emphasize enough. You got to have security. And if you're going to do cyber insurance, you got to have the right type. If you do that, I've been on hundreds of claims. No one wants to go through these things, but they tend to be manageable and people walk away without any, major headaches and major problems. It will be an inconvenience. I don't want to lie, but it's not going to be a career ending, business goes away type event.
Well, that's one reason we maintain a very high level of security, and we encourage all of our clients to do the same and help them get there, just because, nobody wants to go through that if you can avoid it. And then if you do have those protections in place, then chances are your insurance is going to cover you. If you don't, chances are it may not.
Yeah.
So, it's just something that everybody's needs to be aware of these days, because it's not really a matter of if you're going to get hit at some point. It's a matter of when is it that you're going to get hit, and you need to be prepared for that when that happens.
Yeah. And I would tell everybody, before we go, like from a security standpoint, where we see it, things that tend to diminish and minimize these claims, or make sure that you've got multi-factor. Talk with, if it's not John or whoever, make sure you've got multi-factor on email and all remote access. Make sure that you've got the 3-2-1 segregated backups. Make sure that you're doing security awareness training. Those three things probably account for 85% of the claims that we see. If you're doing those three things, and I'm sorry, EDR would be a fourth thing. Make sure that you've got EDR. If you're doing those things, again, you're going to be in a pretty good position. I mean, nothing's foolproof, right? There is no silver bullet out there, but if you have those four things, it takes away a lot of the claims that we see.
Well, we appreciate you being on with us today, Justin. This has been some great information. Really appreciate your insights and all. And I would encourage everyone on the call, if you don't have cyber insurance, reach out to Justin. He can certainly help in that aspect. Just to see where you need to go and what you need to do. So, appreciate you being there. And again, if anybody has any questions that are non-insurance related for me, IT or cybersecurity wise, you can go to my website, www.techsagesolutions.com, and you can schedule a short consultation with me at no additional charge. So on that note, I think we will go ahead and close this out. We appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you, Justin, for sharing with us. And we'll let everybody get some of their time back for their day.
Thanks so much, John. I appreciate it. And everyone have a good day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.